Good evening and welcome to the United Conservative Party of Alberta Leadership Debate. My name is Dave Rutherford. I'm going to be your moderator here tonight. See, just like I told him to do it, he yelled out my name. Thank you for that. Another one. This evening is the first of 5 debates. We are broadcasting this live tonight from Calgary on the UCP website and on Facebook Live. So we are live tonight. The debate is, this debate is going to be focusing on 3 themes. There will be different themes for the other debates throughout the province. Tonight's themes are the economy, clearly, the Alberta resource sector, yes, and conservatism. And the candidates have all been briefed on what the themes are. They don't know the questions, but they know the themes. We have 4 contestants joining us tonight. They'll each give us their positions on these chosen themes, of course, and what they see as the future for the party and for the province of Alberta. We also will have questions 2 tonight, one from the membership of the party through the United Conservative Party website, and also one from social media. It'll be our final question tonight. And so if you, throughout this evening, have a question, I'm going to give you a Twitter address to go to, and you could submit a question that will be asked tonight as our final question to our contestants. You can go to hashtag UCPLDR, hashtag UCPLDR, and the Twitter question will be assessed, and we'll hopefully get your question or one of the audience's questions in tonight. Now, each contestant has been given an equal opportunity, of course, to answer. We've had a preliminary draw that will show you the order in which you will hear from your contestants, and we'll rotate that throughout the evening. There will also be a chance for each contestant to rebut the answers of the first contestant. So we'll tell you a little more detail, some of the housekeeping details in just a moment. But first of all, ladies and gentlemen, let's introduce to you the 2017 leadership contestants, Jason Kenney, Doug Schweitzer, Brian Jean, and Jeff Callaway. Now, each contestant will be invited to make a 2-minute opening statement. Answers to each question will be limited to 2 minutes as we go through our questioning tonight. Contestants are allowed to make a 1-minute rebuttal after everyone has answered the original questions as we go through the scenario tonight. Beside me, sitting with me to help me do some of the timing and the other work we need to do tonight is Tom Ross, the chair of the debate committee. Tom? Now, as we go through this, gentlemen, we'll have the answers to the questions. If you would like to rebut any given question, just please raise your hand. We'll take note of that, and we'll begin the rebuttals in the order in which we see you raise your hands. So that'll be how this will work out tonight. We'll try and keep track of it as best we can. So let's begin tonight with 2-minute opening statements, and I invite Jason Kenney to start us off tonight. Mr. Kenney.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is a dream come true. Just over a year ago, we Conservatives in Alberta seemed hopelessly divided. We seemed to be stuck in a ditch, giving the NDP what they wanted, a vote split that could have let them get a second disastrous term. But we decided to put the future ahead of the past, to bury the hatchet, to focus on what united us rather than what divided us, and to put the province ahead of any political party. We did that, you did that, and we made history on July 22nd. I want to thank all of you, particularly Brian and all of you, Jeff and Doug, for having supported the Unity Project. But now on October 28th, we're going to have to make another important decision. Who has the right kind of experience, temperament, and skills to be a strong Conservative Premier, to hit the ground running on day one, to undo the massive damage of this NDP government, to get our province's economy back on track and renew the Alberta advantage? And who has the experience to take the fight to Justin Trudeau and stand up and defend our province? And so I offer to you a lifetime of experience, from the founding executive director of the Taxpayers Association, who fought the fiscal wars of the 1990s here, to being president of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, to having been a senior minister in some of the major portfolios in Stephen Harper's cabinet, and having helped to lead this process of unity over the past year. I think that gives me the kind of skills and experience that we will need, as well as a kind of conservatism that does not flinch, that doesn't cave or back down under pressure from the NDP, and a commitment to grassroots governance of this fantastic new United Conservative Party, the next government of Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Kenney. Doug Schweitzer. Mr. Schweitzer, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for making it out tonight and being part of this. I also want to thank my fellow candidates for being part of this debate. I look forward to it today. Also, a huge thank you to my wife, Jen. This is a huge commitment on your part as well. I want to start with why I got into this leadership race. I want to make sure that my daughters look at Alberta the same way I did when I decided to make this my home. When I started my professional career here over a decade ago, there was no doubt in my mind that Alberta was a leader in this country. We knew where we stood. We were confident. And we knew exactly what we were going to do. We were going to grow and take on the world. And over the last while, we've lost that edge. And I've seen it too many times in my professional career as a lawyer. Same story. Business starts out, can't get refinancing, struggling, bad policy, market conditions. See it time and time again. People lose their jobs. And that's just not good enough for Alberta. And it hits me personally. My family went through the exact same situation in the early 1980s. Family lost their business, lost their home. My parents struggled for an extended period of time to recover. They were resilient, just like the resilience I see across this province. Albertans are ready to be unleashed again. They're ready to take on the world again, not in year 2 or 3, but right away. That's why we're offering the largest tax relief in Alberta history. We're not going to wait. We're going to do it right away on day one. Because we need to send a message to the world that Alberta is back. In addition to that, too, in this next election campaign, I've gone out and talked to so many people in this amazing province, younger voters as well. They make up the largest voting bloc in the next election campaign. They like where we stand on the fiscal issues. They want to work again. They want jobs again. But time and time again, they come to me, but they want to make sure that this new United Conservative Party shares their values, shares their social values. We have to get them right. If we get them right, we take away the NDP's entire campaign, and we get the focus on the economy and winning in 2019. Thank you very much. I look forward to this debate.
Opening remarks from Brian Jean. Mr. Jean.
Thank you, Dave. For me, leadership is about service. It's about never forgetting why we're here. Because Alberta needs us. It needs us like it's never needed us before. That's why I'm here today, and that's why all of you are here today. I want to restore Alberta to a place of greatness, where opportunity is bountiful, jobs are plentiful, and hope replaces fear. That is my vision for Alberta. I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather. I'm a small businessman, a lawyer, a hunter, and a fisherman. As my wife Kim tells me, I'm not the most polished politician you'll ever hear, but I have spent my entire life serving my community. I've built and I've run businesses that employ Alberta families. I've represented Albertans' interests in Ottawa for 10 years as a member of Parliament, and I've had the great privilege of leading the Wild Rose through a general election, and for the past 2 years have served all of you as the leader of the official opposition here in Alberta. But most importantly, I'm an Albertan, and I love this province. I'm here for Albertans, and I'm here to lead this party to defeat the NDP and form a government that restores prosperity for all Albertans. But friends, This leadership race is about who can guarantee the defeat of the NDP in the next election. And I'm the only candidate that is here today who can win seats in every single region of this province. We brought these two parties together to provide Albertans with a common-sense Conservative party that people can get behind in overwhelming numbers. I'm a unifier. I'm a builder. I am the leader our party needs to defeat the NDP in every corner of Alberta, and together we will take back our province and restore Alberta to prosperity.
And for the 2-minute opening statement from Jeff Callaway. Mr. Callaway.
Hi, I'm Jeff Callaway. I'm a fifth-generation Albertan. Grew up on a dairy farm just north of Calgary, and I've worked in the finance business for over 18 years as an investment advisor. You know, I was baling hay at the age of 8, and I got to say, Brian, you know, when you were telling Wildrose members that you were in favor of farms being forced to have WCB, I and many others in the Wildrose were deeply disappointed. I'm glad you changed your mind on that because, frankly, I think the NDP might have got that idea from you. You know, I got involved with the Wildrose in 2008, and I became president of the party that year when we were just a few names on a spreadsheet. I drafted our party's first business plan, the fundraising plan, and even the news releases. I was president when we won the 2009 by-election, and when we became an official party in 2010. And I stood with Heather Forsyth during the 2014 floor crossings. And I worked with our grassroots, from High Level to Milk River, to keep our party principled and strong all over those years. I'm running to be leader of our party to ensure we have consistent and principled leadership so that after we defeat the NDP in 2019, we can stand up to Justin Trudeau. Yeah, that deserves applause, yeah. And we need a leader who can debate Rachel Notley and win. We need a leader that Albertans don't have to wonder what side of an issue they'll stand on today. And we need someone whose positions and budgets are not seasonal. We know Conservatives win when we are principled, and they're not Conservatives of convenience. I've put forward 3 big ideas I hope the members will support, and to date I've heard from thousands of members who do. Thank you for that support. I'm asking members today to consider who they trust to stand and fight consistently for Alberta and our principles.
Mr. Callaway, your time is up.
For your support. Thank you.
And just a reminder, audience, we'll try to keep the outbursts to a minimum if we can, and you've got to understand, applause does take away from your contestants' time to speak. All right, let's begin with our first question. We'll be discussing some of the major issues facing Albertans in the course of this evening, including the economy, of course. But I'd like to ask first about your views on an overarching topic, Conservatives themselves. In today's hypercharged, often angry political climate, we're hearing lots of discussion about the treatment of gay, lesbian, and transsexual Albertans, for example, as well as often acrimonious debate about race, a topic that wasn't on the lips of most Albertans in the recent past, as well as the role, positive or negative, of social media. Some people advocate that Conservatives declare what they are not, such as not racist, not homophobic, not sexist. My question then is, how do you define being conservative today? And is there a need to identify what you are instead of what you are not? We'll begin with Mr. Kenney. 2 minutes.
Dave, I believe that conservatism is a confidence in ordinary people. It's a belief in the common sense of ordinary women and men. It's a belief in a tradition of ordered liberty, a respect for the wisdom of those who have gone before us and built our institutions and our customs and have given us one of the freest and most prosperous societies in all of human history. It is, but foremost, a belief in civil society, that civil society, people come before government, that the greatest way of of serving human dignity and helping people to achieve their God-given potential is through economic freedom. But it's also a belief in equality of opportunity, not forced equality of outcome, because that way lies the disaster of the history of socialism in the modern period. But it's a belief in my belief of conservatism is a conservatism of the heart, where, too often we are easily characterized as people more focused on balancing budgets and figures and numbers, abstractions, as opposed to real people and their real lives. If we are to earn the confidence of Albertans in the next election, we must demonstrate to them that ours is a conservatism motivated by desire to help to lift up the underdogs of our society, those who are at the margins, to speak to and for single moms and Aboriginal Albertans and new Canadians struggling to integrate, to young people who can't find jobs. We need to offer concrete solutions focused on freedom to the greatest extent possible, market-based solutions to help those individuals to achieve their freedom. But fundamentally, we must never embrace the disastrous ideology of socialism, which has driven our province into this deep and prolonged deficit. We instead offer freedom, hope, and opportunity.
And the same question to Mr. Schweitzer. Mr. Schweitzer, go ahead, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Dave. And this actually comes up in almost every roundtable session that I've held across this province. We've branded our campaign the New Blue. And this is an opportunity with this new campaign and this new party, the United Conservative Party, to have a fresh start, to redefine what it means to be conservative here in Alberta. And I've traveled this province and talking to university students at the University of Alberta, talking to young professional women here in Calgary. And just yesterday, I was up in Innisfail. This couple, they're in their 50s. They have 4 grown daughters in their 20s. And they said to me, we believe in the fiscal plan. We talk to our daughters, and they want jobs, they want economic opportunities. But at the same time, I can't convince my daughters to vote for this new party. I can't convince them to buy in, to get their memberships. They're hesitant. We need to make sure that they get these issues right. They came to me and they said, they used the word homophobic, just like you mentioned, Dave. They used those words. It's not fair. It's not what this party stands for. We need to be clear in where we stand. One of the issues that typically comes up is around gay-straight alliances. We need to offer clarity on that point. We need to make sure that Albertans know that we're not going to be outing kids. And when I look at that issue, you have to look at the stats behind it. The suicide rates that go up in those communities when kids are questioning and transitioning is staggering. The homelessness rates that go up is staggering. The way that I look at this as a parent of 2 little girls, I raise them, I love them. They come to me and tell me stories about what's important in their lives. If for some reason my daughters weren't comfortable coming to talk to me, I'd want to make sure that they had a place to go where they could get the supports they need. Because the biggest nightmare a parent could ever have would be a suicide. So I want to make sure we get these issues right. This party needs to make sure we define ourselves right. Because if we do that, we'll be able to engage the millennials. We'll be able to turn the page on social issues and keep the focus of the next election campaign on the economy, which is where it should be. Because we need to hold the NDP accountable on the economy. But we got to get the social issues right to turn the page.
And our same question to Brian Jean. Mr. Jean, 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, the facts of life are conservative. And I believe that I should be a premier for all Albertans, no matter what their personal choices are, no matter what their backgrounds are or their future are. I believe that a real premier is a premier for every single Albertan, not just some of them. I believe that Alberta should be the destination investors want to invest in, to create jobs and make money. That means prosperity for all Alberta families. I believe the key to the Alberta advantage is low taxes, sensible regulations, and a pro-business attitude in government without picking any winners and losers. My plan, as a Conservative, as a proud Conservative and a proud Albertan, is to restore the Alberta advantage using and axing the carbon tax, bringing corporate tax rates back to 10% in just 2 years, and cutting red tape by 33% in 3 years. I'm a proud Albertan. I'm a proud Conservative. And to sustain prosperity, we need to ensure we have a high quality of life. I will ensure that we have core public services that treat the people of Alberta as best as anywhere in the world, and stable, predictable municipal funding that is in place to not just attract talent, but to keep it here for life. Because it is about serving Albertans and providing them with the best quality of life that they can possibly have, with all of the opportunities that they want to pursue in their time frame, in their way, and in their life. We should allow all of them and encourage every single one of them to do exactly that. Thank you, Dave.
And on the same question, Mr. Callaway, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is, I don't think we have anything to apologize for as Conservatives. And I think when we start playing the games and using the language of the left and the NDP, we end up falling into the traps of the NDP, and that will cause us to risk losing the next election. I think we've got a lot to be proud of as Conservatives. I think you'd all agree with me here, wouldn't you? That's why I'm so excited about bringing these two parties together, getting back to the grassroots, reconnecting with Albertans. And part of that is really accountability within the party that is going to be so important going forward to remain connected to the grassroots and to Albertans. And that's going to be part of the challenge of bringing the two legacy parties together, how we have to build our policy together, to flesh out our bylaws. And that's going to be key as we go into the next election. And I'm a big proponent of that. That was my role as the president of the Old Wild Rose Party, which was to foster that development and engagement. And we saw great success building from 1,000 members up to 45,000 members at the end of the day. But ultimately, the question is about where we're going as a province, given where we've been. This province has been tremendously successful, built on its conservative values, but the NDP is currently in government, and they're fostering a culture of dependency. And that dependency is going to lead us down a road of ruin and impoverishment. And we've got a chance in this next election to create a culture of, or recreate a culture, I should say, of self-reliance and compassion. Because that's who we are as Conservatives. And I believe in that Alberta ethic and that history, and I believe in our future together. That's why I've dedicated these past 9 years to restoring that Alberta advantage. And I'm so excited to continue that forth, no matter how this leadership election comes through. Thank you.
Thank you, contestants. And just a reminder, if you have a rebuttal, just raise your hand and we'll entertain the rebuttals in the order in which you raised your hands. Thank you. Moving on to the second question then. Oh, hang on. We do have, you got to be, quick here. Mr. Kenney, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Well, Dave, on the question of reaching out to people who haven't traditionally voted Conservative, I have probably more experience than just about anybody in Conservative politics on this, because for 15 years, I led a project for the National Conservative Party that reached out to natural, intuitive, small C Conservatives in our communities, in our ethnic, cultural, and immigrant communities, who for too long were trapped as part of the Liberal Party electorate. I reached out to these communities because they were natural Conservatives with a belief in entrepreneurship, an incredible work ethic, a deep devotion to family and respect for tradition, and I managed to undo negative stereotypes that had existed about our party and create relationships of trust. Finally, I said conservatism is about trusting people. I think we need to do that in the way we develop our policies democratically from the grassroots up. One of the reasons the PC coalition fractured was too much top-down leadership that told people what to think rather than listening to them. Let's begin our policy process by listening.
And the next rebuttal from Brian Jean. Mr. Jean.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Kenney. Top-down is not the approach. Bottom-up is how we truly provide all the opportunities necessary. But there's two sides to the equation. Building up the economy is one side, but the spending side also needs to be dealt with. We need to balance the budget as soon as possible. I propose within 3 years. I propose that we implement $2.6 billion in savings in our 2017 pre-budget proposal, to appoint a Fiscal Reform Commission to report where savings can be found so we can implement these as soon as possible without having any whatsoever public service sacrifice. We use these public services. We need them. But conservatism is not just about finding efficiency. It's about growing the economy. And to grow the economy, we need to cut taxes and encourage people to invest right here in Alberta. Send a strong signal out to the international investment community that Alberta is back in business and we're going to have a roaring community and job creation like we've never seen before. Thank you.
And Mr. Schweitzer, go ahead.
I just want to build on the commentary of both my colleagues here on the policy development process. I remember when I first got involved in politics, that first membership that I bought when I was in university. It was really because I wanted to make sure that I could make a difference. I had an idea and I wanted to pursue policy and see it come to fruition. This leadership race and the ideas that we exchange here is literally just the beginning. We need to make sure that people that we're engaging and bringing in as members to this party have a value proposition and that they're there for a reason and can get involved at their constituency level, bring ideas forward in a robust policy development process. That's a key to making sure that we have a sustainable party for the long run. It's the way that the PCs historically had success. And I agree with Mr. Kenney. That's how they lost their way at the end. It became more about insiders and lobbyists and less about policy and people of Alberta. We need to restore that with a robust policy development process that combines just the common sense of the grassroots along with the expertise of experts and the full engagement of our elected officials. Thank you.
And finally, a 1-minute rebuttal. Mr. Callaway, go ahead.
All right, so when we're talking about building this new party right now, and we've each got our track records to stand on. And mine, I'm very proud of my track record of remaining accountable to the membership for all of these years and fostering a process that engaged the grassroots. But at the same time, walking that walk and talking the talk is all about listening to the grassroots and being accountable to them. And Brian, I know we had our disagreements on our executive committee, and you actually interpreted our Constitution to believe that you actually had more of the power in the party than the executive. I've got the minutes, and you know. So the fact of the matter is this is about walking the talk. I'm proud of my record, and that's the reason why members actually voted for me for all of those years, and we had so much success in building this party. That's what I'm committed to seeing happen all of these in the future of this party as well.
Mr. Callaway, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be as civil as we can. Jeff Callaway, thank you. Moving on to our second question, following up really on the aspect of the first one, the role of social media. We've heard through the generations, yes, I'm that old, that the current crop of power brokers needs to reach out to young people to get them interested in politics and the political process. That was true then. But it seems to be even more critical today. The demographics of Alberta have changed. Young people, let's call them millennials for now, seem to be engaged, but they may base their political decisions on much different criteria than others did in the past. And they use the internet almost exclusively for their information. Are debt and deficit on their minds? Are social issues more important? Do they make decisions on likes and dislikes, on appearance over substance? So how do you craft a message and then deliver that message so it resonates with that cohort of voters? Mr. Schweitzer first, please.
Thank you for that question. And in our campaign here, one of the things that we held just a few weeks ago here in Calgary was a rally. I've been to many conservative events for over a decade, participated in them. But at that rally, it was literally the youngest crowd that I've ever seen come to a conservative event. And one of the reasons why I believe we were able to attract such a young crowd, over a couple hundred people came out, was because our campaign is speaking to issues that young Albertans are looking for. Our campaign is being clear on social issues. Our campaign at the same time is making sure they understand that jobs are important. It's that balancing act. We have to make sure we get that balance right. They want to listen to our economic message, the younger Albertans that I talk to. They want that same opportunity. They want to grow again. One of the things I actually found fascinating was that I'm 38 years old, and I had a couple of university students look at me and say, wow, your generation had it easier than mine. And I looked at that saying, wow, I'm 38. I didn't really look at it that way, but they want to work hard. They want to build a prosperous Alberta, but they want the same opportunities that we've had. And as a Conservative Party, to be able to create that environment where we can look into the future and people get the hope. I remember what it was like here. Do people remember 2006 when we were humming, we were confident, we knew we could take on the world? These younger Albertans want that exact same opportunity. We simply just need to communicate with them a little bit differently. Tone is a little bit differently. The last thing that they want is Ottawa-style divisive politics. They want to engage in a positive way and believe again in this future. I fundamentally believe that this party, if we come together, we develop policies, we engage across this beautiful province, they will see that optimistic message that we can have. They will believe in this party. They will believe again in Alberta and the future ahead.
And to answer the same question with 2 minutes, Mr. Kenney, please.
Well, Dave, first the good news. In October of 2015, we had a federal election in which 60% of Albertans, including a majority of millennials, voted for the Conservative Party of Canada, electing 29 of 34 Alberta MPs as Conservatives. So let's stop talking ourselves down already. And you know, every poll I've seen indicates a majority or a strong plurality of the youngest Albertans intend to vote for this brand new Conservative Party. But my view is, first, I have a 4-point approach to attracting the votes of this generation. First of all, we need to focus on those most concerned about their economic security. And a lot of them have been mugged by economic reality. Maybe they voted for a higher minimum wage but ended up with no wage when they lost their job, or a tuition freeze that led to a degree but unemployment. Secondly, there are a lot of millennials who are essentially libertarians, for whom personal freedom is their top theme or priority. And so we need a platform, I believe, that will expand the horizons of personal freedom and push back against some of the excesses of the nanny state and the war on fun. Thirdly, we need to do a radically better job of communicating our opportunity message through media that are relevant to that generation, who consume almost all of their information from handheld wireless devices with professional, compelling videographic and social media content. Fourthly, we need to recruit millennials to be candidates so that they are MLAs and ministers in our government, to be a voice and a face for their generation. You know, Dave, last year, I met a 17-year-old in Hardisty at a gas station who told me we had to get this unity thing done as soon as possible because his dad was depressed after a year of unemployment. He said he was the only paycheck for mom and dad and all 4 of his brothers and sisters, and the pressure was getting to him too. That 17-year-old represents the future of our province. He understands now that politics has consequences for him and his family. We must be the voice for that 17-year-old and his entire generation.
And responding to the same question, Mr. Callaway, please.
Well, you know, one thing I look at the success of Alberta and what's actually created so much success in Alberta, and we actually have attracted a lot of people, youth, across the province, or from across the country, internationally as well. We've been just a magnet because of the strength of our economy and the strength of our policies. But actually, we're losing that right now. And so we come back to that economic agenda to provide opportunity for our youth. That's what my Big 3 idea campaign is all about, is attracting that capital from across the province, but Canada and internationally as well, providing access to international markets, providing new opportunities by capitalizing on our wealth and abundance of natural gas in this province. We've got the talent here. We've just got to put the people to work. And unfortunately, too many of our youth are actually out of work right now. So it's really about reinvigorating that hope and getting this government back on track. I'm confident that whoever ends up leading this party will be able to do that. But from a concrete perspective, one of the things that we actually brought forward in the Wild Rose Party earlier this year was an affiliated organization or association for the party. So it's more than just about having a youth wing to have people involved. And I was a PC at one point too and was involved in the PC side of the youth. But this is about getting youth involved in high schools, getting in colleges, in associations, and it can actually also extend to other trades and professions too, because we need to deliver our message out to the organizations and the groups that are not necessarily involved in politics today and don't just fit into the actual party structure. I think that's a model that we can use as a party to engage more people, not just youth, but other professions and people who haven't been politically engaged. So there it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway. And answering question number 2 as well. 2 minutes. Mr. Jean, please.
Thank you, Dave. I think it's very important that we are relevant and relatable for young people. In 2004, that was my first election, the first time I was elected to public office, and I brought into the campaign office a foosball table and a ping pong table. And I tried to encourage as many young people to come and to do that, to get involved in the political scene in Fort McMurray in particular, and many of those young people still campaign for me to this day. In fact, there's some in the audience this very night, and I appreciate them being here. But the situation is that I truly think that most Albertans, including most young people, are turned off by politics because of the negativity, because of the mudslinging, because of trying to drag people down instead of lifting them up and empowering them. That's why I've said since the very start of this campaign and the last campaign and every campaign that I've been on that I'm not going to be negative. I'm going to be positive. Unifying Albertans is far too important. This unity project that we're in today, right now, is far too important. I've also reached out on social media. As you know, if you've been my Facebook friend for a while now, I have 120,000 followers. I did that on purpose because it's so important to reach out to the young people. They're not coming here tonight. They don't come out to the 20 or 30,000 people that I've talked to over the last several years. They pick up their phone, their smartphone, and they look and see whether we're relevant, whether we're being negative or positive. Also, what I did over the last several years as a leader of the official opposition is I talked at youth groups in Lethbridge, in Medicine Hat, in Calgary, in Edmonton, and these groups were on campus, and we set up some on-campus clubs. I think in Lethbridge I've spoken no less than 3 times over the last 2 years. I think it's very important to relate to young people and to reach out, and that's why I've been so active on social media. That's why I'll continue to do exactly that. But you know, the most important thing is when nobody has a job, even young people get concerned. And I'm going to see a lot of young people vote in the next election.
And as far as rebuttals, the first rebuttal goes to Mr. Schweitzer.
You know what? I agree with many points that Mr. Jean raised there. We need to make sure that we engage younger voters in a positive way. It's really important that we engage them and also on the mediums where they are. But they do show up. They will come out to events. They're just different types of events. If you see our campaign team, the average age is about 24 years old. Like, the people will engage in politics if you make it relevant to them, if you make sure you're talking about issues that matter to them. And our campaign's been doing that. That's why we're attracting young Albertans to our campaign. As I mentioned earlier on, they will show up. We had 200 people out. The average age was about 34. It's amazing what you can do in politics when you actually engage people. The same thing, too, we met with an amazing group of young professional women. And they looked at this campaign, they looked at this party, and they're optimistic about what it can become. We simply have to engage them in a positive and constructive way. Thank you.
And another rebuttal, Mr. Kenney. You have 1 minute. Mr. Kenney, go ahead.
Well, Dave, I think I have a successful track record in attracting youth to be involved in conservative politics. In fact, I was criticized by some anti-unity PCs for having too many young people involved in the PC leadership election, and I plead guilty to that. And you know, we had over 20% of the PC delegates at our leadership convention in March were Albertans under the age of 25, and 80% of them voted for my candidacy and the Unity Plan. But one point, key policy point, a lot of young Albertans feel like they don't have opportunity because they've done what we told them to. They went and got university degrees, encumbered by debt, and can't find employment at their skill level. They're struggling, underemployed or unemployed. I think we need a skills agenda that reinvents the vocational high schools, that follows the example of the German training system, that invests in apprenticeships and experiential learning, and that says that there's every bit as much worth and dignity in a trade certificate as there is in a university degree.
And the next in the rebuttal, Mr. Jean. Mr. Jean, you have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, Dave. I think, I find that I'm very relatable to children, primarily because I've had 3 and I have 2 grandchildren. And I think it's an amazing, amazing gift from God to have those children in my life and grandchildren in my life. And watching them grow up, what's mostly concerning to me is the fact that our government is going in the wrong direction. And I do believe that it's so important not just to talk about jobs, not just to talk about the future, but also to talk about education and training. And I think right now is the perfect example of what I would do differently than the Premier Notley. What I would do is provide training and education facilities that would be open to as many people as possible that are unemployed, that are looking to increase their skills. That's going to make young people relate to us as a Conservative Party. That's going to make young people get involved in the Conservative movement because they see when they need something from their government, we are there to provide it for them. Thank you.
And Mr. Callaway. Mr. Callaway, you have 1 minute.
Thanks. You know, one of the things that ends up building a party together, and I would say one of the hallmarks of any Conservative Party, is our fiscal responsibility and our fiscal positions. But also what motivates people to get involved is where you are on their social values. And some people are socially conservative, some people are small libertarian, and some people are social moderates. And we need all groups together and respecting each of their views to actually get engaged in this party and provide opportunities for each to be involved. We need policies that actually reflect their views and respect them as members and treat them with respect going forward and their engagement in the party, and allow their socially conservative views, free votes in the House or in the legislature. That's important to people who want to see their views reflected in a party. It's what's a hallmark of our Wild Rose Party, any Conservative party, and it was a downfall, frankly, leading into the 2014 floor crossing.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Let's go to question 3. I don't think it would be a stretch to suggest that all of you believe Alberta's economy is a mess. We obviously have been suffering years of low commodity prices, but coupled with that market reality is the political and thus policy evolution that has happened. The Alberta government has instituted a huge carbon tax. We're facing a big jump in the minimum wage, which could cost jobs. Our annual budget deficit is topping $11 billion a year. Our debt could be $60 or $70 billion or more by 2019. In 2004, we were debt-free. Our next segment will deal specifically with the resource sector, but for now, outline for us what measures you advocate for correcting the economic problems facing us. How would you return the Alberta advantage? First of all, Mr. Jean, you have 2 minutes.
Well, Dave, I do want to bring back the Alberta advantage to rebuild Alberta's economy. I think it's within grasp. I think it's very close. As an owner of many businesses here in Alberta over the last 30 years, I know what job creators need to get our economy going again and how important they are to families needing work. Building up the economy is a huge part of balancing the budget. And to do that, we should repeal the carbon tax immediately, reduce tax burden on all families, to cut business taxes to grow the economy, to cut red tape by 1/3 across government, and, of course, to repeal the NDP oil sands cap. Then, as I've mentioned, the spending side. Balancing the budget in 3 years and shrinking the size of government is absolutely essential. Implementing a $2.6 billion in savings plan in our future would be immediately implemented, and I've put forward a detailed plan just in March of this year. I would appoint a Fiscal Reform Commission, which I think is absolutely essential, as I mentioned before, because industry needs to be involved to tell us where to make the changes that will make them the most competitive. Using a hiring and salary freeze to reduce the size and the cost of the bureaucracy would see us back to balance in that 3-year period, and with a competitive public service that will serve Albertans for many years to come, a public service that's proud of their job and empowered by their job. You see, $90 billion is what we estimate by 2020 we will owe. $90 billion. That's $3 billion almost in interest payments each and every year. That's $2,500 for every single family here in Alberta. I think there's a better way, a way where we encourage job growth through cutting the restrictions to job growth, where we encourage families and small businesses to open up businesses here in Alberta and employ Albertans, because small businesses are owned and operated by Albertans wanting a better life and seeking a better opportunity. Thank you.
And answering the same question, Mr. Callaway, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, as I've mentioned before, a hallmark of conservatism is our strength on fiscal issues. And ultimately, at this point in time in our economy and in our province where people are hurting, they're underemployed, they've lost their job. Many people have actually moved here, been here for a couple of years, and then lost their jobs, and they're wondering what to do now, because they came here for the hope and opportunity of Alberta. So as we look at this change in dynamics in our economy and global markets, that's why I put together my Big 3 Ideas plan. And so the first thing is actually to have a natural gas-fueled economy. In conjunction with cutting the carbon tax, we should be using more of our abundant natural gas resources. We've got literally hundreds of TCF of gas that we can use to really jumpstart our economy. It can be things like tax incentives for light-duty vehicles, more use in our fleets, for example, for heavy-duty trucks and buses and garbage fleets. In fact, even the city of Calgary uses some CNG trucks today. It's also developing our petrochemical sector. I've heard ideas as I'll be going across Alberta talking about potentially building $1 billion plants in Medicine Hat for DME. DME is dimethyl ether that is a derivative of natural gas that we can use to get greater recovery rates out of our SAGD. If we've got greater recovery rates out of our oil sands operations, then we can actually generate more royalties and more jobs going forward. And in conjunction with my securing access to export markets, which is about buying the Port of Churchill, I know a number of people have been talking about, it's about building a pipeline so that we can realize better prices on international markets. Today I was speaking with CAP. I saw Doug there today, actually. And it was great to get a warm reception from them about that idea and what that would do for job creation in the province. So I know our second question is, and I get a rebuttal, so I'm going to talk more about that.
Mr. Callaway, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Kenney, 2 minutes, please, Mr. Kenney.
Dave, job number one for our new Conservative government will have to be restoring investor confidence to recreate growth in our economy. And that means for me, if we're in office in June of 2019, to invoke an extraordinary summer sitting of the legislature. I call it the summer of repeal. It begins with Bill 1, the Carbon Tax Repeal Act. And then moving on to repeal other damaging aspects of the NDP's economic legacy, from their recent attack on workplace democracy to Bill 6. I would appoint a minister whose sole focus is deregulation and accelerating the approvals process, much like Premier Gordon Campbell did in BC 16 years ago. And then, of course, we have the longer term. We have to fight like hell to get these pipelines built and to get market access. But I have some longer-term ideas as well about using our Alberta Immigration Nominee Program to make this a destination for some of the smartest people in the world with high levels of human capital, like some of the brilliant foreign students in the United States with postgraduate degrees and venture capital, but they can't get their green cards. Let's give them immediate fast-track permanent residency in Alberta to create a Silicon Valley North here. And as I've talked about, retooling our skills and training system, reinventing the vocational high schools so that we have an education more linked to the labour market. But of course, a key part of renewing our Alberta Advantage is getting back to a balanced budget, starting to pay down this huge NDP debt. That will require a period of sustained fiscal restraint. And that shouldn't be too difficult, given that we spend 20% more per person than the average Canadian province to deliver the same services. If BC can deliver the same services, often with better outcomes, to a larger province and a larger population, we should certainly be able to find some savings so that we can bring back the Alberta fiscal advantage and provide hope and opportunity for the future.
And answering the same question, 2 minutes, Mr. Schweitzer, please.
Thank you very much, Dave. I'm often told by my team to downplay what I do for a living. I'm a partner at an international law firm, and my personal expertise in the area that I focus on is restructuring. Now, most people don't know what that is, but I take companies that are facing financial distress and we turn them around. We take something that has a broken revenue model and we find solutions. That's what I do for a living. Often you're told, don't tell your people you're a lawyer in politics, but here I am today. Now, when I take a look at what's happening here in Alberta, we can't wait 2-3 years to offer Albertans tax relief. We need to send a message that Alberta is back in business on day one. And that includes the largest tax relief in Alberta history. Now, some of the details around that. What we're proposing to do is to repeal the NDP carbon tax. Take the corporate rate from 12% down to 10%. Cut the small business tax in half from 2 to 1. And offer Albertans personal income tax relief. So people making below 100,000, 9%. People making above 100,000, 10%. That's better than the flat tax that we had here before in Alberta. That's going to restore confidence in the market and get people investing again in this province. Now, to balance our budget in the first term, what we have to do is tighten our belt. We're going to have flat budgets for the entire first term. So the same budget in year 1, 2, and 3. I agree with Mr. Kenney that our province simply spends too much per capita, and we need to make sure we get our spending under control. On the red tape side, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business gave Alberta an F. We are dead last. We are so inefficient in this province right now, it's embarrassing. So we've offered a 2-for-1 proposal, same thing that's happening in Manitoba right now. For every new regulation on business, we'll repeal 2. And we'll make sure that we bring best practices to Alberta to make sure we are efficient again and keep our eye on the ball again. Now, the other piece as well, and I'll probably get into this in my rebuttal, is on the minimum wage.
Mr. Schweitzer, thank you. I'll take that as an indication you want to join the rebuttals. Yeah, I'll do. Mr. Callaway, I think you indicated that earlier, that you wanted to get in the rebuttal. We'll let you go first. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. I've been spending a lot of time talking about the Port of Churchill idea, so I figured I'd give some highlights of what that is. You know, the challenge that we actually have in exporting our oil to market is we've seen the NDP government in BC and, you know, dominated by a couple of Green Party members try to really put the boots to Trans Mountain and stop it. We've seen Energy East actually look like it's going to be blocked, and that was about $10 a barrel to actually ship oil to down to New Brunswick near Irving Refinery. This Port of Churchill plan, if we could start it at 250,000 barrels a day, that would actually put about $500 million back into the Alberta government treasury if we actually just had the Alberta government sell our oil on international markets. We could get $5 a barrel better. Now we're not selling at a discount to the Americans who are just going to export to the same markets, and we're also going to be selling to our friends in Newfoundland and New Brunswick. This is a real country-building measure. So I'll talk some more about the economic
All right,
issues
Mr. Galloway, your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Jean. You go ahead. Mr. Jean, you have 1 minute.
Thanks, Dave. I've already talked about expenses, and yes, we spend 20% more than British Columbia per person. As a general rule, about $2,700 more per year we spend on the people in Alberta than what they spend in BC. And I would suggest that British Columbia is not that capitalistic bastion that we've actually thought it was in the past. We are truly, here in Alberta, blessed with the natural resources, but we need to get our expenses back in line. Ultimately, my friends, I think you can check and see that I have a very strong record on low taxes. And taxes are what we need to focus on as well. It was the centerpiece of my 2015 campaign. We can balance the budget without raising taxes. In fact, I believe that smart tax reductions will actually increase revenues, and we've seen that in Alberta before. Alberta used to collect the most personal and corporate taxes in all of Canada because we had the lowest rates. Economic activity is what matters, not the rate. We need economic activity in Alberta,
Jean?
and lower rates lead to more economic activity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And your rebuttal, Mr. Schweitzer, you have 1 minute.
So just adding to my earlier commentary, two other pieces to it. One thing right now that's happening in this province is the NDP is putting in an ideologically driven minimum wage of $15 an hour. A study just came out of Ontario saying that's going to cost Ontario 50,000 jobs. Right now, we cannot be punishing small businesses that are trying to create opportunities for Albertans. And our campaign is committed to resetting the minimum wage at $12.20 in 2019. We need to make sure our small businesses can compete, and it's integral to make sure that we grow our economy. One other piece that I want to add to my earlier plan around balancing the budget is that our campaign is also proposing a public sector wage reset that will save us over $500 million a year. We call it our 963 plan. A little bit too much detail to go through here in a minute, but go to DougSchweitzer.com for details.
And our final rebuttal in this segment, Mr. Kenney, you have 1 minute.
Dave, I think we broadly agree on these policy ideas. I expect we'll see that reflected at our founding convention. But we're going to need a premier who actually has real experience in implementing lower taxes and fiscal responsibility. I was the founding executive director of the Alberta Taxpayers Association back in 1991 when we were headed over the debt cliff, had the largest deficit of any Canadian province. I worked hard to help build up a movement that created the political conditions making it possible for the Klein government to bring about the Ralph Revolution and go on to create the Alberta Advantage. I've advocated for the balanced budget law, the taxpayer protection law, the freedom of information law that allowed for greater transparency on spending, the No More Boondoggles legislation that barred corporate welfare in Alberta, and the Taxpayer Protection Act that requires a referendum before a sales tax can be introduced. And, of course, was part of a federal government that had one of the best economic records in the developed world. I bring that experience to the table.
All right, contestants, moving on to our fourth question, still on the economy. To balance the budget, which I think is the goal of all of you, spending must be brought under control. Are there any sacred cows, if you will, sectors of the province's spending responsibilities that you would not investigate for savings? Is health care or education or other government services off limits for a spending review? You'll obviously hear protests from some quarters when such spending accountability is under the microscope. So where will the savings come from? And why is a balanced budget important? Mr. Calloway, you have 2 minutes.
Well, as a longtime fiscal conservative, I sort of got a little quizzical, honestly, when you say, why are balanced budgets important? Frankly, balanced budgets are important. It's almost like challenging of the very essence of who I am. It's confusing to me. But the fact is, we're just burdening our entire youth and our future generations under debt that ultimately they'll have to pay for, that we are enjoying the services of. One of the things that we've been blessed with on the international financial markets really is really low interest rates. But that's not going to be the case always. We've even seen a couple of interest rate hikes already this year. We're seeing the credit rating of Alberta be downgraded and our borrowing costs exceeded. And those borrowing costs are now taken away from our funding for education and healthcare and justice and roads. And if we continue down this path, we're going to take away the opportunity for our youth for tomorrow. But as we look at how we're going to get there, no, there is no sacred cow that we can that will be sacrosanct. But at the same time, we have to value our frontline workers, the janitors that work in the school that look after them, and the teachers' aides that help our kids. We do need to actually put a little more money into some of the sectors, like in mental health or in the educational system. We've got a tremendously diverse population, and there's different kinds of challenges than even when I went to school out in Cochrane. Everyone used to open to page 142 of the math textbook and go from there. Now we've got different kinds of learning plans, and we can have 20 different learning plans in a school. The challenges in our educational system and healthcare system are more complex than they've ever had before. And we've got to put all options on the table. But getting towards that balanced budget, there is no sacred cow. Thank you.
On the same question, Mr. Jean. Mr. Jean, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, Dave, I appreciate that. I think it's very important because, of course, debt is why we want to balance the budget. We're spending right now $53 billion a year. We only bring in $43 billion through revenues, through income taxes, through royalties. That means ultimately $10 billion a year is our deficit, and $10 billion a year is what we're borrowing. We have to stop borrowing because sooner or later that's going to lead to structural debt. And when that happens, interest rates will rise. And we don't want to be in a situation where we can't afford to even pay our interest rates, our interest payments. That's $3 billion a year, $2,500 per household, as I mentioned. It's not sustainable because it means that $2,500 per year comes out of people's pockets in just 2 years to pay debt and to pay interest that they're not going to have in their pockets that they did 2 years ago. We need to balance the books because we need to get our fiscal house in order, and we need to pay off that $90 billion in debt. There are no sacred cows except for what the people of Alberta want. Because, you see, they're in charge. And I, as the Premier of this province, will make sure they're always in charge. That's the key to government. To have somebody that actually serves the people and do what they want. Instead of thinking they know best. Instead of being filled with bluster and saying, I know best what you need. Instead of, I'm listening. You see, my skill is listening. Talking to people about their desires and their priorities is my priority. I do think that we need to look at things, in particular, the things we buy. You see, 50% of our budget is things we buy. And that's why I've suggested to get back into balance, we can reduce that by $2.6 billion. And we can take care of our public service, and through attrition, 8% of the public service leaves every year. Through attrition, we can get rid of those managers that manage other managers, and don't provide frontline services to the people that matter, Albertans.
And Mr. Schweitzer, Doug Schweitzer, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. When we talk about the economy all the time, sometimes we just talk about numbers, and people think that Conservatives can be cold. But remember, the reason why we're making sure we balance the budget is so we can be competitive when it comes to our taxation levels. That allows us to create job opportunities for Albertans, but also allows us to pay for the social services that Albertans are looking for. Now, to make sure that we can balance our budget in this first term and make sure that we deliver the services Albertans are looking for, we have to empower the social entrepreneurs. We have to look outside the current delivery models. When it comes to healthcare, not every hip and knee surgery needs to be delivered in a pure hospital system. There's so many private sector options, publicly or not-for-profit options that are strongly publicly funded, that are better, faster, and cheaper, that we can deliver to Albertans. The vast majority of surgeries can be provided that way. It'll save us millions of dollars. We have to look at that and empower those social entrepreneurs. Same thing comes to affordable housing. The government is one of the most inefficient rental property managers you can imagine. We need to make sure we empower the not-for-profits that know how to deliver those services in a cost-effective way that don't eat into your operating budget. They know how the financial models work. It's those type of innovative ideas that we need to bring forward in Alberta. The other piece, too, is that, on the sacred cows side of it, our campaign has proposed to take 40% of ATB Financial public and offer it to Albertans to buy. We think that with that proposal there, Albertans love ATB. They're going to buy this. They're going to buy up the equity in ATB, but it'll create over $1 billion that we can then reinvest in our province. It's key to make sure that we find innovative ways to unlock the potential of what we have here in our government and find new ways to approach it. And we will balance that budget before the end of that first term.
And on the same question, Mr. Kenney, you have 2 minutes. Mr. Kenney.
Dave, we cannot borrow and tax our way to prosperity. As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money to spend. And that's what's happening in Alberta right now. And I think most Albertans understand this, which is why I think they're prepared to support a government, a party, that will bring us back to fiscal balance. Because what they're doing right now is, as they borrow $1 billion every month, as they drive us towards a $94 billion debt by 2022, according to Standard & Poor's, they're racking up the interest payments. That's eventually billions of dollars going to bankers and bondholders in Zurich, Toronto, and New York, as opposed to schools and hospitals in Alberta. So if we want to preserve our social programs, if we want quality public education, healthcare, and infrastructure, we have to get this right. We made sacrifices in the 1990s to do so, and we're going to have to make some sacrifices again. But decisions that do not jeopardize or affect the quality of critical frontline services like healthcare. I agree with my colleagues that, in the last 30 years, we went from hospital boards to centralized board to decentralized to re-centralized, and every time the accordion moves in and out, a new layer of bureaucracy is created that never goes away. And frontline nurses and doctors know this. They know billions is being consumed by massive middle management that needs to be pushed out to those on the front lines. But we need to communicate this with compassion. We need to bring Albertans along with us. And we will need a premier with the ability to say no. Today on radio, someone asked me if as premier I was going to give him subsidies for solar panels. And my answer was this: no, we're broke.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I've seen no rebuttal indication, so we'll move on to our next. Look, Mr. Callaway, you have 1 minute.
Ralph Klein was a great premier. We've been in this spot before. People got on board when we had a simple message that we brought as conservatives. People got behind it, and we've just got to ask our public service unions and employees, share the pain, and then share the gain when we're doing better again and back on our feet. It's about having the integrity as leadership and having the strength in leadership, and that's what you've got a choice up here in this leadership race. About who are you going to trust to actually see through the changes that we're going to have to enact as a government. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be protests by the thousands. Who do you end up trusting to actually follow through and can withstand the tests of the protests? Thanks.
And Mr. Jean, you indicated you wanted to rebut. You have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, Dave. I believe government should live within its means and not spend more money than it takes in. We have a bigger spending problem than our revenue problem. And the NDP continued to suggest it's revenue. So did the last government for a period of time. We can't do that. We need to focus on spending and making sure we get that back into line. The amount of debt that's piled up over the last 5 years is absolutely shameful. Most jurisdictions around the world, most investors look at that and say it's not acceptable. We have to stop putting off our tough decisions and mortgaging our children's future. And in the last decade, our spending has far exceeded inflation and population growth, and that's what we need to keep in line with. It truly is. We also need to not just look at our spending as a big mass, but we also have to say 50% is things we buy, 50% is staff and public service. And we need to reform our purchasing and tendering projects so we get rid of that March madness where public service spends so much money, and we need to work with the public service to get back to the line of reality for our cost of the public sector. Thank you.
And Mr. Schweitzer, you go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I just want to share one quick story as to why it's so important that we get our healthcare decision-making back down to the local level. Having traveled this province, I was in Red Deer recently, meeting with people, and this is a complete nightmare scenario. There's a situation where a doctor working his job in a hospital had a heart attack, but they couldn't get the services he needed in Red Deer, and they had to put him in an ambulance and send him up to Edmonton. The community has been screaming for years to get that service, the heart attack services that they need in Red Deer. But AHS in Edmonton keeps telling them no. The local community has raised half the money to build it. And it's simply unacceptable. If we had that decentralized model, there is absolutely no way that decision would be made. So we simply have to empower local decision-making. It's the same story time and time again when it comes to our ambulance services across this province. We need to empower our communities. They know what is best for them.
And thank you. And Mr. Kenney, you have 1 minute.
Dave, when it comes to digging us out of this huge hole the NDP has put us in, we are going to need experienced leadership. As a senior minister of Stephen Harper's government, I was responsible for some of the largest public budgets in the country. As Minister of Immigration, a $5 billion budget, I oversaw $400 million in operational spending reductions without any great political controversy. I was responsible for the largest departmental budget in the country, Employment and Social Development, a $115 billion budget. We oversaw, again, operational spending reductions with no big political blowback. As Minister of National Defense, responsible for a $19 billion budget, we increased our operational tempo with the deployment overseas and in Europe, but still came in under budget. And as Minister for Multiculturalism, underspent that budget consistently by 1/3. We are going to need a Premier who can sit in the chair of the Premier's office and hear the NDP protests out front every day, but who, like Ralph Klein, will not blink.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Obviously, much of what we talked about today touches on the resource sector. Getting Alberta oil to the rest of the world remains a challenge. We've seen pipelines approved, like Northern Gateway, by one government, then canceled by the next government. We've seen some pipelines approved in Canada only to be denied or delayed by the United States. We have one approved pipeline that's being blocked by a neighboring provincial government. Shipping oil by rail has grown some 50% since last year, and this less safe method of shipment is predicted to continue to grow as pipeline capacity fills up. So going forward, what can Alberta do to cut through the political logjam that hinders export of Alberta oil? Mr. Kenney, you have 2 minutes.
Well, first, physician, heal thyself. We need to cut regulations to bring investment back to this province. One of the main reasons that we've lost $34 billion of oil and gas investment to the oil sector and other jurisdictions is because we've gone from the 7th best to I think the 44th best place for upstream oil and gas investment in North America, partly because of our own regulatory burden. It takes over a year sometimes to get something approved by the Alberta Energy Regulator that they can get approved in a week in West Texas. So we need to start right here at home. Second point, we need to make it clear to our partners in Confederation that if they violate the rule of law and the economic union that is Canada, if the BC government, through dilatory measures, stands in the way of the construction of the approved expansion of Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain, that there will be consequences. We need a Premier who will make that clear to BC and Ottawa, like Peter Lougheed did in the early 1980s. The Mayor of Vancouver says he wants a carbon-free economy by 2040. Maybe we should help give him a carbon-free Vancouver by 2020. By refusing by refusing to sign permits for the export of oil and gas through that pipeline that has existed safely for 6 decades, which the NDP apparently doesn't know about. And right now, our provincial government should be going to the Court of Queen's Bench and making an application to quash the outrageous decision of the National Energy Board to violate our jurisdiction by expanding its review of Energy East into admissions here in Alberta. Peter Lougheed fought for and won the clear constitutional jurisdiction for that to be exclusive provincial regulatory authority. We need a premier who will not act like a lapdog for Ottawa, but like a watchdog for Alberta.
And thank you. And Mr. Schweitzer, same question, 2 minutes, please.
When it comes to people that are dealing with Alberta right now, Albertans have had enough. They're tired. They're tired of taking it. They're tired of bending over. They're tired of making sure they want to get their products to market. They just do. We have to get this done. We're taking a look at British Columbia right now. They're putting up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock on a pipeline that has already been approved and should be going ahead. Now, what do we have to do here in this province? One of the levers that we do have is a New West Partnership, free trade agreement between the 4 Western provinces. First thing that we can do is kick out BC from the New West Partnership and start dealing with jurisdictions that want to deal with us. Our economy is stronger than BC's, and if they want to get into a trade war, bring it on. Now, when it comes to dealing with Ottawa, we all here, I didn't vote for Justin Trudeau in the last election campaign, and I'm assuming most of the people here didn't as well. But one of the things, Justin Trudeau is our Prime Minister. He is the leader of our federal government right now. And there's one file where we actually are on a similar page, and that comes to Kinder Morgan. When those shovels go in the ground in British Columbia, we're probably going to see an enormous amount of political heat coming. When they go to expand the port in British Columbia, that heat is going to get even more important. So we need to make sure that we work with our federal partners on getting that pipeline done. They need to make sure as well that Canada has a reputation of building infrastructure. Right now, our reputation is harmed around the world. Ottawa needs it. We're aligned there. Now, when it comes to standing up to Ottawa, things around small businesses, when it comes to the carbon tax, when it comes to tanker bans, we have to stand up to them firmly. But we can't be caught up in Ottawa grudges, partisanship, when it comes to putting Alberta first and acting in the best interest of Alberta.
And Mr. Jean, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Dave. Well, as somebody that's a 50-year resident of Fort McMurray and having lived through Pierre Trudeau and the National Energy Program, I can assure you I know what it's like to be down and trodden. As a Fort McMurray resident, I understand how we need to and can balance resource development and conservation, how we can get into a fight from time to time. But I've seen how integrated our economy is with resource development, and I believe that our energy, agricultural, and forestry sectors have tremendous potential. But we can't unleash that potential if we don't have cooperation from Confederation. You see, we're in a partnership. The federal government is not the boss. The division of powers under Section 91 and 92 make it very clear that we have the ability to challenge other jurisdictions, including the federal government, if they don't play by the rules, by the Constitution. You see, I've appeared in the Court of Queen's Bench hundreds and hundreds of times as a litigator in Fort McMurray, taking on some of the biggest companies and the biggest defendants in order to win for the people that I represent. I want to represent the people of Alberta so I can continue to win for them because it's so important. I believe we have a moral imperative. If we don't produce the resources the world wants, it just comes from other jurisdictions. That's not helpful for us, and frankly, it's not helpful for the world. More Canadian oil, more Alberta oil is better for the world. Many of you which don't care about the environment, and I truly believe that we need to do something different. Resources are very important to our economy. I believe that winning and leadership is not about bluster. It's not about rhetoric. It's about winning. It's about getting the job done for the people that you represent. As a litigator, as a business person, as a politician at the federal level, the provincial level, and as a leader of the opposition, I have led and I have succeeded. I will fight for Albertans. I will make sure that we win. But sometimes it comes down to not just rhetoric and bluster or fighting. It comes down to sitting at a table and negotiating.
Your time is up. Thank you.
I will do that.
And Mr. Callaway, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I sort of feel like this has been set up for my big three ideas, so I'll just kind of continue on that. But the fact is, I'm never going to take for granted developing our natural resources. We should take every opportunity to see their development. The wealth creation that we've seen in this province and the attraction of talent and people that we've seen over the previous decades is testament to that. But we've seen not only the BC NDP try to blockade Trans Mountain, we've seen the federal Liberals try to put the brakes through using the NEB to put the blocks on Energy East. We've already seen in Alberta the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline, and that was blocked 20, 30 years ago. In fact, actually, the BC NDP is dredging up old judges to try and put blockades in front of Trans Mountain. But the reason why it's so important to get our products to market is because it's just so economically important for our opportunity. And we're talking about youth and engaging youth. It's that opportunity that they want, the job creation that they need. It's the jobs that are created and the wealth that's generated from the corporations that will end up funding our provincial budgets. That's what's going to help end up erasing our deficit that we face. Never mind getting to our debt, but first our deficit. That'll fund our education and healthcare systems. But that's why I talk about getting the Port of Churchill going, building a pipeline to access export markets. That's $500 million just right there, folks, on the provincial budget. It's also about, by having the Alberta government do it, is showing confidence as the Alberta government and showing that leadership like Premier Lougheed did back in the early 80s to go toe-to-toe with the federal government so that if anyone is opposing it, if the David Suzukis of the world are doing this, they are ultimately opposing the health care, the education, the prosperity, and the hope of Alberta. We need to make that kind of a strong statement in Alberta.
Mr. Callaway, your time is up. Thank you. And we'll enter the rebuttal phase. Mr. Kenney, you indicated you wanted to rebut. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
David, Brian mentioned sitting at the table. I've sat at the table for dozens of hours with Justin Trudeau. He was my critic in opposition. Let me tell you, it's not that impressive. I won't be distracted by the selfies or the socks. Secondly, if I were Premier today, I'd be using my ability to speak fluent French to go down to Quebec every month and make the argument that they don't know about how they benefit from our resources. But thirdly, we need, like Premier Lougheed, to create facts. If the federal government insists on imposing their carbon tax on us, if they do not reverse the NEB's mandate creep into our jurisdiction on Energy East, I am prepared to create a fact by using the Quebec secession reference to hold a referendum on changing the equalization formula to remove non-renewable resource revenues from the definition of fiscal capacity to force the federal government to negotiate with us in good faith.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Kenney, thank you. Doug Schweitzer, you have a minute.
Here, we're getting into conversations about selfies and socks again. When it comes down to this, we need to make sure that we deal with our federal government responsibly. What is in the best interest of Albertans? We need to deal with Ottawa in a tough way, in a firm way. Taking cheap shots around selfies and socks is not going to be the diplomatic way when we do have some commonality. The other piece of it, on equalization, there's two politicians up here from Ottawa that voted in favor of the current equalization formula. Why didn't they stand up for Alberta then? Fix it then.
You finished? Thank you.
I'm good.
Sometimes they can't read the clock. I don't know. Mr. Jean, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Thanks, Dave. I do have a positive vision for our province. I do have a positive vision for our country, for the people of Alberta and the people of Canada. I believe that by lifting people up and empowering them and educating them and making the opportunities in front of them that they can take a hold of and follow is what we should be doing. I believe in relationships. I believe in sitting down at the table with people and trying to negotiate, just like I did for many years in Ottawa, just like I did for many years as a litigator and as a business person. When it comes time to litigate, when it comes time to have differences that you need to have someone else come in and settle, well, that's important. Just like the fact the Constitution cannot be changed without the people of Alberta agreeing to do so. That's why I've suggested that we have a referendum at the first municipal election so that you can have your decision on equalization, and that's the only way the Supreme Court of Canada will force the federal government to renegotiate the division of powers in the Constitution. As a lawyer, I know that, and I will get it done.
And 1 minute for Mr. Callaway. Go ahead.
Sure. Just picking up on the regulatory burden, just so that people understand. Husky, a big oil company here in Calgary, they've got a SAGD project in Alberta. They have equivalent SAGD projects that they can do in Saskatchewan. They have operations on both sides of the border. In Alberta, it takes 4 years to actually get a project done, but in Saskatchewan, it takes 4 months. That's the height of the challenge that's in front of us, folks, to fix the regulatory system. But back on equalization just for a moment. You know, this is something that needs to be, I think we'll all have a very busy day one in canceling the carbon tax. But the second part of my job that day will be calling a referendum on equalization. I'm not going to wait for a municipal referendum because this is something that costs Alberta $20-some billion a year. We can't wait for the sake of saving $5 million a couple of years down the road. We've got to address it now, address the unfair formula, and there's no time to waste on this, folks.
Mr. Callaway, thank you. All right, turning to our sixth question in this first series. We hear a lot about Alberta's resources, clearly, which means those in the ground, but another resource is our people. Capital investments in Alberta have declined sharply. That means job creation is lagging far behind other jurisdictions. Our unemployment rate is 7.8%. We lost more than 14,000 jobs in July. Average weekly earnings are dropping. Office towers are empty. Streets of downtown Calgary are quieter than ever. You can even find a parking spot these days. It's crazy. So looking into the next few years, what do you see as necessary to bring back that investment in Alberta? Mr. Schweitzer, you're first. 2 minutes, please.
Well, I think the biggest part that we can do is making sure that we reset on day one and send the message that Alberta is back in business. We've talked about this earlier on in the campaign, but I fundamentally believe that the largest tax relief in Alberta history on day one is fundamental to restoring that confidence. I see this in my day job and working with companies right now. They try to get refinancings. They try and keep on. They try and keep their employees on. But too many times I've just seen in my job capital going to other jurisdictions, largely south of the border as well. We simply have to turn this around in this province and making sure that this is the most competitive jurisdiction in the world. We can get that done. We have so many advantages in this province. We're blessed with resources. When it comes to our people, Alberta is young. We are well educated and diverse. We need to embrace that and empower it and give them confidence again that they're going to have the same opportunities that were there for so many of us. The way that we can do that is being disciplined in how we're spending our resources, spending our money, balancing our books, so making sure that they can have those same opportunities. Those jobs will get created here again. The NDP tries to promote the $15 an hour minimum wage. But I remember a time when you could stock shelves at Superstore for $17 an hour because we were so competitive in this province. The other thing, too, is that younger generation that's coming up in this province, and my daughters, I want them to look at Alberta the same way that so many of us do, as the best place on earth to live, the most prosperous community that we have. Our children need to have that same opportunity. And making those right decisions, the disciplined decisions today, will give it to them.
At the risk of slowing momentum, I'm going to take just a quick break. We want to replenish the water supply for our contestants. We don't want them to get dry throats as we go through this process. Thank you very much, Sonia. Getting back then to our rotation, the question about what do you see as necessary to bring back investment in Alberta? Mr. Kenney, you have 2 minutes.
I've already talked about investment day, but let me talk about people. because that's why we're here. Alberta was, for decades, a magnet for hard workers, risk takers, and entrepreneurs, people who wanted to dream big and work hard to achieve those dreams. But sadly, thanks in part to the disastrous ideological policies of the NDP, we've become a province with a brain drain. To over 204,000 Albertans out of work, nearly 100,000 full-time jobs lost since the NDP came to office, and 100,000 people, I estimate, who have given up looking for work altogether. You know, I've met the people who have suffered from this. A single mom here in Calgary who told me she'd looked for 6 months after losing her job, only to find the same job that she was doing when she was 26. A retail entry-level job. She told me that she felt like she'd lost half of her life. So we must once again be the province where the moving trucks are moving towards rather than away from. And human capital is such a huge part of that. That's why I've talked about retooling our education and training system, recreating the vocational high schools, encouraging young people to pursue fulfilling lifetime vocations in the trades, not just in professions, valuing a trade certificate as much as a university degree, but also using the 5,000 Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program certificates we have to invite some of the world's best and brightest through a pilot program that would invite, for example, students with an advanced degree from some of the world's leading research universities who have venture capital support to do a startup business. Let's invite, and many of them are being kicked out of the United States because of the dysfunctionality of their immigration system. Let us say to them that if they want to bring their brains and their human and financial capital to Alberta, we'll give them fast-track, immediate permanent residency to create a Silicon Valley North right here in Alberta.
And the same question to Mr. Callaway. Mr. Callaway, you have 2 minutes.
Well, folks, I have some bad news for you to start out with. I don't think we're going to be getting social license from David Suzuki anytime soon. The fact is, though, that we need to take control of our own destiny. We've got it, we're a province of can do, and we shouldn't be listening to others who want us to not do. My third big idea is actually about bringing investment back to Alberta. I've worked with some tax lawyers and securities lawyers to actually come up with some innovative tax structure. We used to have something called income trusts in this province that, or actually in this country, that actually brought a lot of investment into Alberta. This tax structure would actually be an incentive to attract capital back to Alberta, regardless of the sector, be it energy or agriculture or forestry or whatever it may be. But I know in talking to our guys in my firm that are talking to the Chinese and the Indians and investment funds from around the world, they've lost that confidence in us. And so if we can bring that capital back, then we're going to see projects developed. We're going to put people to work, even in the medical sector and the tech sector, people who do an R&D. That's what we need to actually grow and diversify our economy. It's that kind of incentive and that kind of big idea and forward-looking idea that's going to bring that capital back and put our youth back to work again. Thank you.
And on the same question then, Mr. Jean, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Dave. Government has 2 essential powers. One is to create legislation and regulations, and of course the other is to send signals. And right now we need to send signals to the international investment community as soon as possible. That was one of the reasons why I was so for uniting the parties. That is one of the reasons that I went to New York, Washington, and Toronto at the end of February of this year. Yes, I used my own money to go. And I talked to investment advisors that I've worked with for many years, friends, people that told me when I asked them how to get competitiveness back to Alberta and how to get them to reinvest their billions of dollars back in Alberta, made it very clear to me, we're not going to reinvest in Alberta while you have this government. They knew who the government was. They knew who the Premier was. And what was most shocking was that they knew that they weren't going to invest and they'd already withdrawn most of the investments from Alberta that they managed. I believe those signals that we need to send are, as Doug said, strong signals of low competitive taxation, strong signals of reducing regulatory burdens on companies and corporations. When a company in Alberta takes a year to get approval to drill a well, and right next door in Saskatchewan it's 4 months, in North Dakota it's 4 weeks, in Texas it's 1 week. Well, why would you come to Alberta if you don't have to go through all those hoops? That's why I want to send strong signals immediately. signals of competitiveness, signals of a strong future for shareholders that come and have companies invest in Alberta. You see, I really believe that it is about the people. I really believe it's about the people having jobs. I really believe what we need to do is invest in education, in trade schools, and open them up right now for the unemployed, the people that need to upgrade their skills in order to get jobs. Keeping track of regulations has been something I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. So I know exactly what regulations to get rid of. And you know, after this is done, I'm going to continue exactly doing that. Thank you.
And with no indications of rebuttals, we'll move on to our next question. As I said in the introduction, we did open up the questioning process to members of the party, and through the party website, many questions were submitted. One has been selected. The next question comes from UCP member Ron Coper. So Ron says to all of you, if you are selected as the new leader of the UCP, what will you do specifically to engage the other 3 candidates? Mr. Jean, you're first to answer. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Dave, and please recognize that I didn't go through all this work and you didn't go through all this work. I'm so proud of our members, the PC members, the Wild Rose members, in uniting the parties, in uniting Conservatives, and truly in uniting Alberta. I'm not going to put these fine gentlemen aside. I'm going to, once they get elected, bring them into the cabinet and make sure that if I'm the Premier, they are empowered to help all of us. Because ultimately, my friends, united we are stronger. A strong Calgary means a strong Fort McMurray, means a strong Edmonton, means a strong Red Deer and Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, means a strong Alberta. And uniting people is what I'm best at. Focusing on a task and making sure we accomplish that task is absolutely essential. But we can't do it if we don't empower those around us, if we don't make them part of the team to take on the struggle. Because truly, folks, we have people from all sides trying to take us down. We don't need to take each other down. There's going to be enough people out there to do it for us. My hope is that I'm elected as the leader of the United Conservative Party. I will continue to make sure that our MLAs that serve us work very hard, keep track of the regulations and legislation, and are ready to take back our province and to restore prosperity immediately. I will do that, and I will make sure that these gentlemen, along with all of our MLAs, are part of it, because we need to do it together. Thank you.
And the same question to Mr. Callaway. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Specifically to the question, I mean, I'd be honored to work with each of these 3 guys. You know, Brian and I have our differences, but, you know, really, he's a good, I like the guy. I do. But we're prize fighters. We're tough guys. But that being said, this is really about bringing a party together. And I think this is going to take all of us, not just the 4 of us on stage to form a part of a great cabinet, but also recruiting great candidates from across this province. And I know that was actually one of the driving factors why I was supporting Unity, is because there were, frankly, people wondering who they should run for. You know, the PCs or the Wild Rose, or how should we do this? So I'm really looking forward to the quality of the candidates that we're going to be putting up against the NDP in the next election as we fight together to get this province back on track. And that's really what it's about, is getting this province back on track and restoring that Alberta advantage. And then doing it with everyone in this audience as we develop our policies together, what we stand for, what our marching orders are going to be going into this next election. I'm looking very much forward to that. That's really what I was trying to do as the president of the Wild Rose Party, was really engage everyone, be it from the executive caucus leader, members, donors, all across the province. So I'm really encouraged about the enthusiasm for this party. I think we're seeing it in the polls, and it would be an honor to work with all 3 of you.
And the same question to Mr. Kenney. Mr. Kenney, you have 2 minutes.
Dave, let me answer Ron's question by first saying what would happen if I'm not elected by the members. I've said for every single day for the past 14 months that if another person is chosen by the members to lead this party, that person will have my total, undivided, enthusiastic support, because this unity project will only work if we are prepared to park our egos and put the province first. That is my absolute commitment. And by the way, I didn't give up one of the safest seats in Parliament, my only source of income a year ago, to put 90,000 clicks on my pickup, doing over 800 events across the province in order to jeopardize unity. Let me tell you what I would do if I am elected leader. I would do what Peter Lougheed did in 1970 and 71. He reached out to the A-team of Albertans, asked people to step up for public service, to make sacrifices, accomplished people in business and other walks of life. And I would try to do the same thing to encourage some of the most talented Albertans, including some who are abroad, to come home and to help, because one person will not be able to do this. We are going to be inheriting a fiscal disaster, a catastrophic loss of investor confidence. We'll still be bearing the scars of this recession. We'll need to modernize our public services. This will require a big team of principled, diverse, ethical conservatives to get it done. And I believe that includes the 4 people on this stage, and I have absolutely committed to including them, my 3 competitors, in our team as key players in renewing the Alberta advantage.
And Mr. Schweitzer, you too have 2 minutes.
No, this is the question you wish you went first. A lot of similar territory being covered off here. I mean, we have amazing candidates up on stage here. All of us bring different skill sets to the table, different types of experience. Obviously, I'd want to sit down on day one with each of the individuals up here about how we're going to build our party. But this really goes beyond any one of us. This goes about building our party and working towards the future of Alberta. We also need to make sure that this party is sustainable for the long term. So there's going to be another leadership race, sometime into the future. We're going to make sure that this thing is sustainable for all Albertans. That's the prosperity that this party has to bring to Alberta. That's the opportunity that we have right now in shaping this party. But it really is a matter to all of us here in this room and people across Alberta. As Jason mentioned, it's a matter of attracting talented people to step up. That is one of the reasons why Peter Lougheed was so successful in those early days. He attracted talented people. And believe me, having traveled to so many communities over the last 3 months across Alberta, you would be amazed at the talented people that are ready to step up. They're ready to lead. We're going to have the most talented legislature, I believe, after the next election, probably in Alberta history. Because this party believes in Alberta and the public is there for us. We're going to engage them and we're going to build this party. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, as we suggest, if there are no rebuttals, I'll move, Mr. Callaway.
I'll be quick. It's a friendly one. And actually, I just got to say, there's probably no better person that demonstrates the optimism for this party than I think Doug, because as you know, he's an insolvency lawyer. I have to think business is booming right now. And the guy's going to, if we get elected, put himself out of work. So he's making a career transition, and kudos to you, Doug. So.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway.
No response.
As we mentioned earlier, another source of questions would be from social media. We have a question from Twitter tonight, and it goes like this. How do you plan to incentivize the energy industry to innovate climate-friendly technology to make Alberta not only a leader in energy, but in sustainability? And the first answer would go to Mr. Callaway.
Sure. Well, this is great. Frankly, when we talk about canceling the carbon tax, which, again, I wish I could have been there last week to sign that for the CTF, but I think I was technically in Toefield at the time. But, we got to get rid of the carbon tax because that's it's basically a sales tax on Alberta society. But that said, I often talk about as Conservatives what we're against, but also what we're for. And that's where I come back to that big idea number one again, which is the natural gas-fueled economy. Because if we're using natural gas in our economy, more broadly, we're going to be reducing our emissions. Natural gas, relative to to diesel is it's about a 30% decline in emissions. We'll lower our NOx and our SOx and our particulates. Those are all contributing factors to greenhouse gases. It cleans up our economy, and it'll put people to work from the field up to the office towers. It'll generate more in royalties for this province. It'll fill up the service sectors that are, especially in our eastern part of the province. Like I went to Brooks, and I looked at a building out there. It was 60,000 square feet. You could see on the signs all around the building, all of the former service companies that used to operate there. Now the Brooks baseball team uses it for winter batting practice. That's a bad sign for Alberta. So we can use more natural gas in our economy that will lower our emissions, increase our energy intensity. We'll do it cleaner. It's a more concrete and fiscally responsible and viable alternative than funding and sending, frankly, billions of dollars to other companies around the world to come here, erect solar farms where the equipment is purchased outside of Alberta, and Albertans are stuck for the bill at the end of the day. That's not a solution. But if we use more of what we're naturally blessed with, based on the talent that we have, and we do it cleanly, this can be an Alberta success.
Your time is up. Thank you. The same question to Mr. Jean. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Dave. Well, first of all, I want to be clear. I don't think we have any fiscal room whatsoever right now to incentivize the climate change portfolio anymore. Right now, we are the world leaders on oil sands, on tailings, on the oil and gas industry, on the environment, in human resources, making sure that the rule of law is obeyed. We have nothing to apologize for. And right now, we are... We have nothing to apologize for. I was 10 years in Ottawa. I saw how they thought of our oil and gas industry. And frankly, my friends, I think they need to be educated on what's going on here in Alberta. Not just with climate change, not just what we're doing in our oil and gas industry, not just what we're doing on our agri-foods and agricultural industry or our forestry industry, but my friends, we need to tell them what we're doing on the green file, because we have some of the best green energy in the world right here in Alberta, whether it's Suncor's wind farms in Pincher Creek and all of the other wind farms in Alberta, whether it's some of the new technology that helps with the NOx and SOx out of our emissions. All of these things are done better than anywhere else. Our water consumption is down by 75% just in the last few years. Tailings ponds are now mostly dry, and they have figured out what to do in order to solve that problem. Even pond number 1, which I visit from time to time with tours of elected officials to educate them on what's happened. Well, it's dry, it's back, and we are leading the world on it. I truly believe that working together with industry is the key to it, to make sure that industry is leading the file, and they do it right now. And I believe that they will continue to do it as long as we continue to manage that file forward. I don't believe we should shut down coal in Alberta. I believe we should take... This accelerated shutdown is making us non-competitive. What we should do instead is take the technology that we already have here for clean coal and export that to the world, to China, to India, to the other group. Thank you.
And the same question to Mr. Schweitzer. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Has there been anything more frustrating to watch than the NDP implementation of their green agenda on power generation? It's one of the most frustrating things to see. And how they handled the power purchase agreements that were handled back destabilized our credibility in this province. It's just disappointing, time and time again. They've gone and settled these agreements. Now the private sector is trying to figure out what's happening in Alberta. Many of them are making moves thinking coal's done. There may be opportunities on technology, as my friend Brian here mentioned. But you know what? The thing that's really hard right now is that these decisions that the NDP are making are impacting Alberta communities. If you've ever had a chance to go to some of these coal communities that have been directly impacted, it's heartbreaking. There's so much uncertainty in those communities right now. They don't know what the future holds. And Alberta, we need to step up for those communities. We need to be there for those communities, and we need to make sure that they have certainty going forward. Right now, we don't quite know what we're going to inherit from the NDP when it comes to our power market in this province. They've got an ideological agenda. We can all hope that they don't lock in too many agreements that will be detrimental to the future of this province. One of the things that we have to do as a big priority within the first 100 days is bring together experts from around this province in power generation, bring together people from those communities, and figure out exactly how we're going to deliver power in Alberta in a sustainable way. The last thing that we need is another Ontario coming to Alberta, where power prices where power bills exceed your mortgage payment. It's unacceptable. We cannot allow that to come to this province. We cannot allow an ideological green agenda set how we generate power, because power keeps us competitive. Businesses need certainty. Homes need to be heated. That's it.
And the same question for Mr. Kenney. Mr. Kenney, you have 2 minutes.
The International Energy Agency predicts that there will be a growing global demand for hydrocarbon-based energy, oil and gas, through at least 2040. The question is then, who will supply that demand? Will it be Canada, Alberta, with the highest environmental, human rights, and labor standards of any major oil and gas producer in the world, or will we surrender that growing global market to some of the world's worst dictatorships, kleptocracies, and theocracies? I think the world needs more Canadian oil to displace the conflict regimes that are currently dominating global markets, and we shouldn't be shy about saying so. But here in Canada, the solution to sustainability on the environmental front is technology. It's not punishing consumers. It's not telling seniors that they should pay more to heat their homes in the winter. We're adding even more taxes on small businesses that are already struggling. The solution is intensive investment in research and development to constantly shrink the environmental footprint of our oil and gas production and energy consumption. So I think the previous PC government actually had a pretty good policy setting with a levy on major emitters that went into a tech fund. And I think Brad Wall is absolutely right, that instead of driving up power prices that will just reduce the diversification of the Alberta economy by shutting down our coal plants in a big hurry, instead of pushing thousands of Albertans out of work, instead of following the failed example of Ontario's power policies, let us, as Brian said, export our clean coal technology to the rest of the world that is planning on building over 1,600 new coal-fired plants. Why would we shoot ourselves in our own foot economically while the rest of the world is planning on massive increases in those emissions? So I think it's about practical results, not about punishing ourselves. We should be part of the global solution, but we shouldn't impose costs on ourselves that no one else is.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. We have had no indications of rebuttal. Well, 1, 2, and others. I expect 3, and would that be 4? All right, we're just keeping track of who indicated rebuttal first. I think it's important right now because, believe it or not, we are early. And so we have a 2-hour time slot. We're a little bit early. So we indicated earlier, gentlemen, that there would not be a chance for a final message. There would not be a wrap-up possibility. I think you should use your rebuttal time now for exactly that, if I may. And I'll be so generous as to extend the rebuttal time to 2 minutes.
Oh, no, that is...
Whoa.
I don't know. I know. I'm all heart. All right, the indication of the rebuttals came first from Mr. Schweitzer. Mr. Schweitzer, in rebuttal and conclusion, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you much, Dave. Wouldn't it be great to have Dave back on the radio?
Here, here. Dave for Premier.
I also just want to thank my fellow candidates up here for this robust debate. It makes all of us better when we have a chance to exchange ideas and put forward our plans for the future of this province. This is really just the beginning. We have got 4 more of these across the province, and I look forward to them and exchanging ideas. To the people that have been watching online, hopefully people have been participating. Hopefully there's more than 50 people out there. But really, with this new party, we have an opportunity of a lifetime. We really do have the ability for a fresh start and to carve a new path for Alberta that gives Albertans hope. For me, as I indicated earlier on, the main driver for me is I want to make sure that my daughters look at Alberta the same way I do. The same way that my grandparents, when they came here after World War I, looked at this Alberta as a place of opportunity. It gave them land and the ability to raise a family. and live in peace. I think Alberta can offer that same kind of hope that gave to my grandparents, to my daughters. And I think as well, as we go out and talk to so many Albertans, we need to engage them in a constructive and positive way. Our campaign offers this party a new, fresh start, where we make sure that we get the fiscal issues right that you've heard about here so much today, get our economy going again, and give people hope about the future. But also to make sure that we get our social issues right. Because that young demographic is the largest demographic. The millennials are the largest voting bloc in the next election campaign. To make sure that we can continually engage with them and bring them into our party so they're excited and proud to be conservatives and call themselves conservatives. We need to make sure we get that right and engage them in the right way. By taking away the social issues from the NDP, we'll keep the focus on the economy and we'll win the next election.
The next speaker in the hand-raising derby is Mr. Jean.
Hold on. I had 5 seconds.
You had 5 seconds?
I had 5 seconds.
We'll reset the clock and drop the puck again.
All right,
Awesome. You have a final statement, final comment? Go ahead.
I just really hope that I can earn your support, earn your trust, and humbly I ask. I mean, giving a vote is one of the most emotional things you can do. I humbly ask for your vote on October 28th.
All right. All right, then. Our next speaker, Mr. Jean, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Dave. I want to be clear in relation to the last question that I don't believe in corporate welfare. I do not believe that Albertans and their tax money should go to making sure that corporations stay in Alberta. If they can't be competitive with low taxation and low regulation, good competitive regulation, they shouldn't be here. You see, I don't work for corporate Alberta. I don't work for corporate Canada. I don't work for any corporation at all. I work for Albertans. And I believe that Albertans in every single decision of your Premier should come first, Canadians second, and the rest of the world third. I do work for Albertans, and I am a servant leader, and I've shown it in my community. And for the last 2 hours, you've had a glimpse into what the future of our United Party looks like. It's a future that can include honest debate on policy for how we can get Alberta back on track. Or it's a future rife with division and anger, paving the path for what the NDP and Rachel Notley want, another NDP election. And I'm not prepared to give her that. And I will tell you, I've tried to rise above the mudslinging, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to continue to focus on issues that actually matter to Albertans, because that's why I'm here. It's the only reason I'm here. I'm here for Albertans and will always put Albertans first. I ask you for your support so that together we can restore our great province to prosperity. I thank all of the members on this stage, all of the audience, and especially the people I'm most proud of that got me here today, and that's the members of our new United Conservative Party. Thank you.
And our next speaker would be, thank you, everybody. Our next speaker is Mr. Kenney. Mr. Kenney, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Dave, we will be inheriting a huge challenge as a Conservative government in 2019. We are going to need experienced, capable, proven leadership to put together a team that can reverse the damage of this NDP government, get our province back on track, and restore hope and opportunity. And I offer, in a spirit of servant leadership, my lifetime of experience from the time that I helped to start the Alberta Taxpayers Association and got Ralph Klein to scrap the MLA pension plan and pressed that government to balance the provincial budget, the largest deficit in the country, to being president of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Maclean's magazine called me the tax fighter for the work that I did with our team in those days, to having led some of the largest departments in the country, brought about deep and challenging reforms to a broken immigration system, while at the same time working successfully to double the vote for the Conservative Party of Canada amongst new Canadians, to become the only centre-right party in the world to win a higher share of votes amongst immigrants than native-born citizens, a proven ability to reach out, having brought in the skills agenda and support for apprenticeship and trades training as Minister of the largest government department in Canada, as having been Minister of National Defence, deploying our military to take the fight to genocidal terrorists, and chairing the Operations Committee of Cabinet that oversees the day-to-day functioning of the national government, and over the past year in having helped to lead this process of unity that has been really a voice and a vehicle for the vast majority of grassroots Albertans who were being ignored by our political elites, who told us to bury the hatchet, to put behind us a decade of division, to put the province ahead of any political party. And so that is the record I offer to you in a spirit of servant leadership. We will need that kind of leadership, not just to get the province back on track, but to stand up to Justin Trudeau, leadership that does not flinch, a leader that does not blink. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks to all of you.
And thank you all very much. And 2 minutes for Mr. Callaway. Mr. Callaway, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I thank you guys to putting your names forward too. This is going to be a really spirited race. I really want to thank everyone that showed up tonight and everyone that's showing up to all of the different meetings for whichever candidate that you're interested in seeing. But I encourage you to engage with all of us. I think, frankly, that in politics, in Alberta, we probably got a little bit lazy in this province and we became a little bit disengaged. I think by virtue of an NDP government, we're all being forced to be a little more engaged in this province to get us back on track. So thank you for showing up tonight. Please, thank you. And really what it comes down to is the motivation about why we're doing this today. I mean, each of us, I think, we can have a story, and some we've touched on a little bit today. The tough stories that are out there facing Alberta right now. And I mean, I think of some of the geophysicists that I've met. There's about 80% unemployment right now. I don't think Amazon's going to come and save their jobs and put that work in a warehouse. That's not a solution for Alberta. We've got a natural amount of talent and skill in this province. We just need to build on our natural and abundant wealth of opportunity. We can get this province back on track. That's what we're all fighting for today. That's what we're going to continue to fight for. And we're going to need all of you to work with us together, no matter who wins. And so I encourage you, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get people involved out there, because it's the only way that we're going to get this province back on track. So thanks very much, everyone.
Well, thank you to all our contestants this evening. That ends our debate for this evening. Just a quick reminder for the media, leadership contestants will be available here on the stage in about 5 minutes. I want to thank everybody who came out here to the theater tonight, everybody who spent time at home watching us tonight. Thank you all very much. The next debate will be in Edmonton on September 28th at Northlands Expo Center. Don't miss that one. Good luck to all our contestants as this race continues. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. Thank you, everybody, and good night.